So, what was the most rewarding part of user tests?
User tests are not rewarding.
Please elaborate.
User tests are pain and trauma, man. Like not necessarily for the participants, although depending on how crashy the build is, But when you're a developer, watching somebody fail at a thing that you wanted them to be fun is very difficult, right? So rewarding is when it works out the way that you hoped, which usually doesn't happen in a user test because you're only testing the things that you don't know work, right? But probably if there were satisfying moments, it was when we'd get feedback and it would be so much stronger than we were thinking. Like it's just like this, like when people would say, you have something here, like this is great, how can I buy this, right? That kind of stuff is really cool, but it's not what you expect when you go into user testing. Like you go into user testing because you're going to watch some people suffer for a while. And the net result of their suffering is that the general audience won't have to suffer through that, I used to say, in game design, some of us have this idea that a game designer needs to have their spirit tamed a bit, right? Like a wild horse, say. And they're not really useful until you break them in a little. And what we do to break them in is we send them to user tests.
So in video games, you do what's called load balancing, where, if somebody's got too much work, but there's something you can kind of pull off of them and give to someone else, you do that, right? Because you don't want to stress anybody out. And so they actually were like, well, Ray's not going to have time to work on final level, and you've finished up Dark Light Crypt, so let's give you final level, and you can just kind of revamp it. But what was really interesting is we were far enough along in development at that point that we really couldn't change that much. So the art was kind of set, but our artist had done a really great job of making these very modular pieces. So I was able to like double the size of the level because cool. Because of the way they had built it. And then I got them, they had these really wicked looking claw thingies along the sides. And I went over to one of our artists that did the kind of game art. It's things that we use in mechanics, so like push blocks or crystals or whatever. And I went over and I asked him, I was like, hey, can we break these off of the level and can I turn them into a hazard? And he was like, oh yeah. And I think it took him like an hour. And so then I made it where they would sit there and they'd kind of twitch. And whenever you walked underneath them, they would snap down on you. And I distinctly remember the first time I called someone over and I was like, hey, run through this hallway for me. And they started running down the hallway. And I think they started squealing. It was great. They were just like, oh my God, this level's so much more terrifying now.
Vicarious Visions had their own development tool. So every time the new company would, or sort of the company working on the current game would start, they had to re-implement all of the Skylanders that the other team had done in the previous game in their development tool. So every time we traded off, we effectively had to do work that had already been done, but in a different tool because we weren't sharing tool sets. So finally, by the time Imaginators rolled around, we sort of got wise and started using Vicarious Visions development tool, which was also a great tool in its own right.
Wow, so for stuff like Trap Team, you would have had to recreate the Skylanders that were in the Swap Force.
Yes, and maybe the biggest challenge was for Swap Force. They had to recreate the 32 original.
Wow.
Members. And that was one of the incredible things, I think, in terms of just a fan-friendly gesture. Like having each game support all of the legacy Skylanders was a really important priority for us. And it did become, as you might imagine, as the years go by and more Skylanders stack up, it becomes a lot of work to maintain.
You design this toy in 3D or in a drawing where there's no physicality at all. And then you build a 3D model or a sculpture, and now it's got a 3D form, but oh, hey, it's got to fit inside the package. So do we know the package dimensions? Yes, okay, good. So you make your toy fit in there. Oh, but it can't be any too sharp, and it can't be have a thin arm holding a heavy sword, or it'll droop. And so So then you have engineers who take the toy and they sort of cut it into parts so that the toy can be cast in these individual parts. Now you can choose different color plastic base for each of the parts. So in some cases, you could have like a gold arm with silver detail around it, and on the other side, it's literally a cast silver arm with gold detail because you could use less paint operations to do that. So you start off with this just like painting, and like, oh, okay, we're going to have the smooth color gradation going down his back, this rainbow cape, and then it comes back and you've got 28 paint ops just for the cape, and your budget is like 30 paint ops, and the eyes are going to take 2 or 3. So it's just like, oh boy, how do we do this? And okay, what if we cast the arm in this color? And okay, we'll get rid of this detail, but we'll cast it as a separate part so that we can use a different plastic. And so it's this ever-evolving optimization so that you can get the most detailed toy that's the coolest with the budget that you're given. And pennies, man, you never knew how important pennies were. Like, if you can save a penny in it, if you work for a day and you save a penny on a toy, that was a really good day.
This is like the history of Skylanders in one monologue. Here we go. When we first started, our idea for this was that similar to what I was talking about earlier about, the characters are going to have to be the same, so we have to sort of wow them with a lot of sort of epic moments. When we first started on this, the plan was to have many levels, each one with a different gimmick, and the levels would be pretty short. It would be almost like a Crash Bandicoot, where you've just got a hint of what's going on, and you get through a level pretty quickly, but it's got one gimmick that's the whole thing. And so when we first spec'd this out, it was, we're going to have like 100 levels, and we're just going to go nuts on these things. So, and each one was going to be a very fast thing. As a matter of fact, the first version of Crystal High Castle was actually much shorter. I think it was almost just you're entering the castle, you're getting up to the top, and then that would be it. There was no boss battle. It was just a really fast breeze through a level. We thought that we were approaching our alpha, where all of the features were in. We had rough versions of the levels. There were still some levels to be created, but we knew what they were going to be, so we weren't worried about it. And apparently there was a meeting at Activision where Bobby Kotick is looking at the progress, and he's looking at the prototype toys, which admittedly were not, the first versions were not very impressive. They were more like Happy Meal toys. And he looked at our game, which had a lot of levels, but none of them were really like super pristine AAA looking. They were more like, we were treating it as this is a game that we're going to, we're going to be happy if we get kids to buy it and blah, blah, blah.
You mentioned earlier when it was Spyro's Kingdom, Spyro was the one sort of giving tasks to the Skylanders, if they were even called Skylanders at that point.
They were minions, I think, at that point.
Interesting. So that was going to be my question. Was Spyro like a bad guy?
No.
Because it was just minions, make me my castle.
Minions was the development name.
Right.
And for the same reason you pointed out, we didn't call them minions, right?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something like a villain said. For a while, they were called champions, right? They tried a whole bunch of different names for them, and it wasn't until I think one of the producers on the Activision side suggested Skylander as what we called them, that the whole concept and the name and everything clicked together in terms of what these things were. They were Skylanders. They were mighty heroes, right? Like, that you, as the Portal Master, were wielding.
Thank you for watching this preview for the Skylanders Spyro's Adventure developer commentary. There has been some overwhelming response to this, and I can't thank you enough. I've been wanting to bring this to you for ages, and I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Now, there are some that are spewing hate at Skylanders, and I won't name names, and I knew this was going to happen. Please don't dismiss this series. Regardless of your stance, maybe you think it ruined Spyro, or you have nostalgia for the originals, or maybe you think it's a game for kids. Regardless, you can't deny it's a solid platforming series that is not only a lot of fun, but it kickstarted a very successful genre in this past decade. And as of right now, Spyro is back to its classic roots with Reignited Trilogy, and I don't think that would have necessarily happened if Skylanders didn't keep Spyro alive. But I think more than anything, the reason you should watch this series is important as you can learn about what the industry is like, including how to get into the gaming industry. You'll learn a lot about each corner of the industry, or at least as much as I could get into. There's essentially 9 hours of stories from multiple people, some heartwarming, some heartbreaking, and some that was not public knowledge prior to this series. I think it's really cool, and I can't wait for you to learn more alongside me. Thank you very much once again for all your support, and I'll see you on January 25th for when the series begins. Hope you enjoy it. Take care. Bye bye.